Hi, good evening, and welcome to the Jess plus Scott plus You show, where you are the you and participate fully in our event. So please have our event page up and open so that you can provide comments during the show, and we will be able to include those. I was thinking about today's event, and I had something come to mind. And of course now I can't find my note, go figure. But it has to do with The Go-Giver, the book The Go-Giver. And The Go-Giver, I wish I would have remembered where I wrote that down at. Let me pull it up really quick because I have it written down. The whole idea of tonight's show has to do with what we give and who we serve. And so the quote from The Go-Giver, which was written by Bob Burg and John David Mann, is that your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Now that could be your clients, that could be your customers, that could be your colleagues, that could be your partners in life or your partners in business. So as we go through this show and we're thinking about that, I wanted to set the stage with that piece of it because we're also, when we get towards the end of the show, this is a little bit of a setup for what we're doing in January. And I'm going to bring Scott on now because it's really hard for us to not talk about January shows. We're so excited about them.
We are very excited, and I'm also very excited about tonight's program. It has come together ever so nicely, and I have never been as productive in my entire life, Jess, as I have been in the last hour, because we have 8 wonderful segments. There are 7 wonderful segments that we've included in tonight's program, and they all were created in the last hour and a half because I decided I wanted to put a little bit of an open to each one. And I can even, is it all right to show a little bit of a preview with our episode open right now?
Let's do it.
Okay, we'll give it a try. Okay, I am a humble person. But this is going to work, right?
Always.
Any audio?
Nope, no audio.
Okay. Well, it came together, but it didn't come together with audio. This is a little bit of a preview of some of the segments that we have.
And the idea being going through the history of what we previewed in our event description this evening.
There we go. So there we are. I'm going to pay a little bit of attention to this. If you could introduce people to the topic a little bit, that would be useful.
Absolutely.
And we'll go
so when Scott and I have been, every time we get together, we come up with this awesome, fabulous idea that we want to run with. And tonight's show is no exception. What we are finding is that there are so many different ways that we are used to seeing video or media occur in our everyday life. And as we are consuming more online, and as we are moving towards being able to produce more and more of our own videos, it's amazing to see some of the similarities that existed with something like public access television, so that anybody like us with the right connections and the right and the funds to do it could go to a studio and put their message out there. Today we have less of an obstacle that way, and the Hangout on Air feature allows us to work a lot more with that.
Hi there. Very nice job. We're going to try this one more time just to see what happens here. Right? Yeah. Okay, we're going to do this is going to be for real. All right, now we're underway, guys. Here we go. And it's so funny, Jess, because I've switched my monitors around, I was trying to punch the buttons on the wrong monitor. Isn't that so funny?
You know what? I totally understand. I do that with drawers and closets, not computers, but I understand the similarities there. It's really funny. We were actually having a conversation today. I say we, Scott. I was in another conversation, and we were talking about our show, and it was really interesting because our technical abilities came up, and it was very surprising that I'm as technical as you are, just in very different ways. And so depending on what we're talking about, you're the go-to person, and on other things, I'm the go-to person, and people don't really understand which of us does what for our show, which is cool, because that means everybody thinks we do everything, and that's just practice. So let's jump in with the public access. And what was your take? So everybody got my view before the introduction played of what I thought that this topic brought. You actually lived this. This is your previous career, and so you're going to be able to bring a little bit more depth to our conversation and where some of those similarities are at.
I learned so much in this last week about Hangouts on Air, and it was really surprising. We started off, and I was thinking that I could take something that I did in the 1980s and 1990s in terms of community access television and draw a parallel between the two, because there are different production modes that were developed and became very mature back then, and these were citizen-produced programs back then, and now we're at the beginning of our Hangout on Air career in terms of citizen-produced programs as well. And I thought, okay, well, we have here are the modes that we had back then. Single camera C-SPAN. So you go out in the field with a single camera, and C-SPAN was just starting out. They didn't have a big budget, so they would just sit it down, put a microphone, they'd zoom out, If you were interested in the topic, then you didn't care about production values. Your eyes would be glued to the TV screen, and you'd be absorbing every syllable. If it were, my favorite example, a zoning commission meeting, and the decision as to whether or not your taxes would go up or not, and this was important to you.
Hey, before you continue, I want to jump in. James Worth says, Roger, don't include this one. What is Roger?
Roger, don't include this one. I don't know.
Roger. That must have been a show.
Oh, okay.
We'll see. James, he'll have to comment again and tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have single camera films, single camera C-SPAN style, and then there's single camera film style where you go out and it's like a film. You go from all sorts of different angles, and then you edit it together in post-production. Then there would be studio switched, and that's what Hangouts on Air are, is essentially studio, but the studio happens to be all of our offices or our home. It's our webcams and so forth, and it's Google that does the switching, and a variety of other production modes. And the more I looked into it, the less I saw that there is a parallel, because there are just so many more capabilities nowadays, and people are going in a different direction. But what I did discover is that there is an atmosphere or an attitude or a personality and an energy in the 1980s in public access, and it came through very clearly. And there is a different personality nowadays with Hangouts on Air. So I thought that we could compare and contrast that a little bit. And then,
before we continue, I want to dive into that a little bit more. You were talking about each having their own energy. Are there similarities? Let's talk about the similarities between the energy of public access, what you saw there, versus the similarities to what you see here with Hangouts on Air.
People are very excited to be able to have the keys to the kingdom, to be able to drive the car around the block. And they invest a lot of time and effort into it. They're invested, and it means an awful lot to them. And they care about their audience, and they care about their guests, and they care about their program.
Okay, you have to repeat because I was reading a comment. That was today?
That's both. You wanted the similarities.
No, that was the similarities. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's
very
clear.
Right.
Okay, sorry, I smiled because James was telling me in the comments that he's being snarky, which got me distracted. And your point was very well taken, is that there is a care for the audience, and there is a care to serve, and there is a care to give, and goes back to our opening quote about, you know, putting everybody else's interests first in a way.
What I could not find, and I looked, was that most of the programs had not survived the test of time. There were a certain type, and I've got some examples here. I'm eager to get to them. But basically, there were a lot of programs back then where people would just go into the studio, they'd sit down, and they'd talk back and forth. And I couldn't find any of them, to be honest with you. And it got me thinking, what is the life expectancy of a Hangout on Air nowadays? When was the last time, Jess, you watched a Hangout on Air that was more than 6 weeks old?
I did it today because you asked me that earlier.
Okay. I thought I could get away with it.
Though, you make a good point, right? What is the shelf life of the video content we are creating?
And that struck me that the facility I worked at didn't just produce, on my watch, didn't just produce dozens or even hundreds or even thousands. The numbers of programs that were produced were in the tens of thousands that people had. And you would think that they would put them up on YouTube. And yet, for the most part, the standard run-of-the-mill type programs didn't make it there. But there are some that were a little bit outstanding that survived the test of time, and they are just as valid or just as interesting today as they were 20 years ago. Do you think that we should go ahead and go in on one of them just to get the ball rolling?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
So this one is, I think, 1983 or so, and Bill Nye's from Seattle, and this was his very first television appearance, and it happened to be in public access. So here we go.
A very special guest. I'm really happy to have this guy here because he was recently on the cover of People magazine. He really was. And we're glad to have him here. He's a friend of mine. He's a comedian, and I've watched him perform for several years. I think you'll enjoy him. Put your hands together. Welcome, Bill Nye.
My name is Bill. As Matt explained, my name is Bill. In television, I really can't hear you. It's like, it just reminds me of a singles bar. When you go in and say, hi, my name is Bill. I work in an office. Yeah, I have a job, and I drive a car. Do you want to go home with me? My name is Bill. My name is Bill. Great. But once in a while, you meet the Bob Who people. Do you know what I'm talking about? You probably don't. I'll explain it to you. So where you go in and you say, my name is Bill. She says, my name is Karen. That's nice. Where are you from? I'm from Seattle. And then she says, oh, you're from Seattle. Do you know Bob? So then I always like to get him and say, yeah, Bob who? Bob, get it? Joke. Oh, well. I had an idea, as I often do. You could maybe go to the driver's license place, write them one check, $27. And before you take the test, they get you drunk. See, first of all, the test would be more realistic. But the main thing is when the cop picks you up, you'll look like the picture. My closing.
Bill. Bill Nye, come on, ladies and
gentlemen. My name is Bill. Am I moving too fast? My name is Bill.
Come on over, have a seat.
Studio audience, what a team. What a
Bill.
team.
Come on over, have a seat. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming.
Nice to see you, Matt. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting because I didn't know he was a comedian.
Well, that's how he kind of started off, and then he went to a local television station and was on a Saturday Night Live like local production, and then he found his niche with Bill Nye the Science Guy.
That's cool.
So that is very much an example of a studio shoot that would be multiple cameras switched.
Okay.
And kind of interesting. People can try out their talents on public access, and they can do exactly the same thing on Hangouts on Air. This is a great training ground for someone.
So, Scott, can we do multi-camera studio switched in our setup on a Hangout on Air today?
Well, that's kind of what we're doing right now, and the switcher, the technical director in the control room, happens to be, the primary one, happens to be someplace in the bowels of Google, so that whoever's talking, it automatically switches to the person who's talking. But Jess, you have control of being able to override what happens in terms of switching, because you can do what is known as blue boxing. It's in the film strip underneath. And then actually I have, and you could too, but you choose not to, I have two computers, my PC and my laptop, and they're both signed on. So there's the switching between these two cameras as well. So this is a 3-camera operation that we've got going now.
Well, what if it was just me? Let's just say it was me. Would there be a way for me to set up using 2 cameras where I was switching back and forth, and like what you see on TV, behind the scenes type things where you're looking over here and you're talking, and then you're looking over here, you turn and you have a different background and all of that stuff?
Well, there are a couple of ways that you could have multiple sources. One is that if you had 2 computers and your one Google account, then you could just manually blue box yourself and go back and forth between the two. And that would be, you could have a close-up and then a medium, or close-up and a long shot, something like that. Okay. We have a friend who does a craft show, and if she had
Shout
2
her out,
cameras.
Heather Crafter.
That's right. We can do that. We're supposed to do that. and it's great. What is it again?
Her name is Heather Crafter, right?
Heather Crafter, and it's a live Crafter Live show. It's terrific. Well, she could actually have 2 cameras if she had enough equipment, and firepower, and upload speed and whatnot, so that one would be trained on her, and then one could be up above an aerial one that looks down on what she's doing. There's another way that you can kind of there's screen share. So even within one computer, you can screen share from your camcorder to a PowerPoint, or in this case, this is a screen share to a Prezi that I'm using. I find that it's a very handy way. A third way of doing it is that you have the overlays. It's like the lower third, and I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if you can or if you want to tax the resources of your computer, but I'd love it if you were to put up your lower third.
Let me do that. Hang on.
Yeah. So that is a special effects if you have transparency. But one of the things that you could do is you could just have it a full, a full graphic that has no transparency at all. So when you put up the overlay, you would have something in front of your camera, in front of you, that people would see. And that's another way of bringing in another video source.
All right, like this?
Yeah, just like that.
Just like that. That's my custom overlay.
That's terrific. Why don't you keep it up for the rest of the show just for the fun of it? Do you mind?
I get to be sparkly and brilliant.
What's that red
that's
thing?
That's not true. I am sparkly and brilliant because of all of you viewers and all of the awesomeness that you bring.
Okay.
So let's just put it out there.
I have talked enough. One of the things that...
Hang on before you go. Before you change topics, Bruce McCallum was actually talking that he has a similar background and was in the industry as well in the 80s, and he was talking about comparing then to now about the production time, how it used to be really long to the time that today it's very short. And realistically, the comparison, the similarity is that in either case, the content is key.
Yeah, I know, Bruce. And boy, you are so spot on. I hadn't really thought about that either. I mean, one of the great things about Hangouts, you didn't exactly ask the differences. We could have people who would phone in back then, and so there's a little bit of interaction, but there was nothing quite like this. And if you wanted to have video production, there was a crew that had to drive cross town, and they all had to be at the same place at the same time. And instead of having it on demand, we have video on demand when we go to YouTube, but we have production on demand. You don't have to schedule the room. Whereas for, it used to be, and you would be competing with other people. So it might take weeks just to get the right time, and you had to coordinate everyone to come together. And then there was a different technology for editing, so you had to do it in real time. It was linear as opposed to digital, and all sorts of things. So it was a good comment, Bruce. Things are so
now,
much.
Phil is asking a question too. Are you familiar with XSplit?
Am I familiar with?
He says, have you used XSplit?
No, I have not used XSplit.
What is that?
I don't know,
okay.
But from the name, I'm wondering. I've heard through the grapevine that there's a way of having a split screen on Hangouts on Air, and maybe Phil can give us a URL that people can follow.
Okay, good.
On the event page. So that is a motivation for people to find the Jess plus Scott plus you business page, and then that will click you through to our event page for this particular program that we have, and then we'll have resources there.
So you started to go into the multi-camera studio, field switched, where we were, at one point in time, we'd all get in our cars and we'd go someplace. Would that be like a storm chaser?
Okay. Well, actually, multi-camera field switch is what we used to call a remote van. So there would be
so even today, where you see them on the side of the road or at a parade or something.
Yeah. So, but nowadays, it's you could think of it as bringing together satellite feeds from across the country, across the world, and switching between them, and that there is no home studio, or maybe your office is the home studio because you have more control than the rest of us who would be in a Hangout.
Oh yeah, so that would also be, so for example, our case, when I was at a conference, you were the home base, and we connected and had a little interviewee thing come on, and then we went about our business. We disconnected, and I went back to the conference, and you stayed in Seattle.
That's right, we did that, didn't we? Yeah. I know you're reading the comments from the comment tracker. What's up?
Okay, so Phil is talking about the fact that XSplitter is a software that lets you do split camera angles. Dan McDermott uses it in his show, and I made James laugh with being a storm chaser.
Okay. Well, we've got a lot of videos to go through, and so
take another one. And while you're queuing it up, I actually was thinking I could be like the remote field by going into my kitchen and having my iPhone and being on in my kitchen in my iPhone. But we didn't get that far in the planning, so we're not going to get to demonstrate that live. But that would be where one person or even a combination of 2 or 3 people in a setting could utilize multiple screens, like Scott and I we always use 3 screens. We always have some sort of media or medium to add to our show, like the next video.
Yeah, like that, and also a little bit of a teaser for next month. We just might talk about having more than just one camera per person, right?
That's right. Okay, I'm blue boxing.
Here we go. So, I don't know. It is entirely possible for someone to do something like this with Hangouts on Air, and yet I don't think I've seen anything. And I want you to tell me. You haven't seen this yet, Jess.
Well, from the start, I haven't seen it, but I can't wait. This is going to be great.
Well, I would love if there's someone in our viewing audience who has seen something like this.
Now all I need is a...
There you go.
I need a little I could have Lammy.
And if they want to do it their own, we'll promote it for them. So here we go.
That's right, we will. We will do a shout out for that.
Huh.
Andy and Bandy, it's time to rock and roll into the weekend with some Club Cerebratron. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let me introduce my brother Handy. Hello, and let me introduce my brother Bandy. Aha, welcome. Welcome to Handy and Bandy's Wacky Shack Fun Time Hour. We're so glad you could join us. In order for me to always show up on time, I do one of two things. You can do this at home too if you're interested. You can either set your watch ahead 5 minutes so that you always think that it's 5 minutes later than it is and therefore you're always on time, or the slightly more difficult route to go, turn everyone else's watches back 5 minutes so that you show up 5 minutes early.
That's tougher.
Much tougher. Toughest part is probably breaking into the Naval Observatory in Pensacola and turning back the nuclear clock.
So, can you see that? For a transcript of this program, grab a pencil and paper, sit down in front of your TV, and write down every word we say.
Now, see, no, I have not seen anything like that, and I think there is a potential. I don't know who the audience is, but it's totally out of the ballpark, and I actually do think that there is a place for, I'm assuming it's for people not your age, people not my age, maybe people older than Carter's age, somewhere between Carter and Michael's age, right? And so, and of course the topic, though, I have to tell you, just brings home lots of memories, because one time I had to set all of the clocks in our house 5 minutes fast so we would leave on time, and I was so bummed when I forgot to set the ones in the car, so I was found out.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh well.
Yeah, that's so funny. That's so funny.
Well, so tell me, okay, so you know, we've seen a comedy show and we've seen a puppet show, and what's the next one about? Let's just jump right in and look at that.
This is a political satire one, and it has an edge. A lot of these have an edge to it, so let's just see what this one is like. It's, well, here we go. Let's see if it'll work.
Welcome to Crossfire on CNN, where we delve deeply into the issues of the day. On the left, myself, Michael Kinsley, and on the right, the lady who doesn't just talk family values. She married Mr. Family Values himself. And of course, I'm talking about, you guessed it, the talented and lovely Mrs. Potato Head herself, Marilyn Quayle. Good evening, Marilyn.
Good evening, Mike. I'm not too sure about that intro.
Oh, come on, Marilyn. If you can't stand the heat, don't advocate the kitchen.
Zip it, Mike. Perhaps you're being a bit off color tonight in a misguided attempt to segue to our topic of the evening, sexual harassment in politics. Personified by Governor Mike Lowry of Washington. Oh, that's the Washington without the Beltway.
Well, perhaps the state of Washington should dedicate a chastity beltway.
Oh, cute, Mike. Anyway, with us tonight is His Honor, Governor Mike Lowry.
Oh,
So.
Okay, so, well, now I want to talk about the last two, because the last two actually used some sort of video editing tool like we use Prezi in our shows. Would that be accurate, or is that the wrong comparison to make?
I don't think so. This one right here that we have, this was in studio, and it switched between two cameras.
Oh, the
so
end.
This was
the end where it swirled out.
Oh, that was me.
Oh, that was you.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
I thought that was something else. So let's go back to the puppet one for a minute, you know, because they had the background and the cutout photos, which we can do too in some of the editing that you do.
And that was at the very beginning. So they had a pre-produced opening, and then I think what they did was that they had a pre-produced opening, and then they went back into their archives and they brought out old shows, and it was an old show that we saw in terms of the puppets. But what we're doing tonight is a little bit of an example of the value of being able to take just snippets of longer longer form pieces, because you don't need to watch and you can't watch the entire thing to get the point. And when we get to the next set of videos, which are innovative ways of using Hangouts on Air that most people haven't thought about. So that'll be the second half of our show. That'll be the second half.
So, well, okay, you said something and now I forgot my train of thought. It had to do, though, with, I don't know. Can you repeat what you said? Maybe we should continue forward.
Well, everyone else can back up and see what we just recorded, but we can't. We're the only ones who don't have that ability. So this is kind of not only down memory lane, but a comparing and contrasting between two periods of time. People are a lot more video savvy nowadays than they were back then as well, and the adoption of technology, I think, is going a little bit more quickly as well. It took a long time to teach people. There would be 4 2 or 3 hour classes that would bring people up to speed. Well, I'm thinking about it a little bit more deeply, because it still takes a fair amount of practice in order to accomplish Hangouts on Air with a measure of facility. Ronnie Bincer is fond of saying that you need to know the technology and know the tools to be able to make a good first impression, to avoid, for example, what happened to me this time when we had the open without any audio. And sometimes, you don't get a second chance. So, and the same thing was true 20 years ago. This was one of the similarities. You need to go through a pretty substantial learning curve before the technology starts to disappear in your hands. So, okay, so what we got.
I'd love to talk about impressions for a moment.
Sure, go for it.
Well, with you, not a monologue, but with you, because I was thinking about the opportunity for having this added medium, whatever it is, whether it's a screenshot, whether it's a desktop share, whether it's a Prezi or a PowerPoint or some other sort of media that can be brought into the conversation. It takes a lot of time to do that planning, and it takes even more time to be able to execute it effectively. And, one of the things that I love is that we do it in every show. And some of our shows, we have no issues. And some of our shows we do. And that's actually also part of the technology. And I actually think that brings the human element into it, that, we're doing this, we're doing it. It's not really like record to tape, I think is the phrase that you used. I had no idea what that was when you first said that to me. But I think this is more like the record to tape, where you don't get to do a do-over in real time.
Yeah, the phrase is live to tape, and it's a little bit like dialing your television. Or dialing your telephone. You don't have a dial on a telephone, but sometimes people. I haven't heard that much of it recently. And let's see, I was going to key off of something else that you said, and now it's my turn to think. Now, what was it that I was going to say? And I wish I could dial back what you were saying. Oh man, and it was such a great comment too.
It'll come back. While we're thinking about it, let's let that fly around. Maybe I'll even remember mine. James asked us a question that I thought, it's a little off topic, but I think this is a good place to ask it. And he was talking about how are we each logged into our own individual accounts, and then we log into our JSY account to do this. And that's a really good question, because there are a couple of ways to actually do that. And we create all of the events from the JSY page. However, we actually run the recordings through my YouTube channel, and then we download them, make any edits that are necessary, and then we upload them to the JSU library for replay and resource.
So it's a lot easier to do the management of all of this if it's from a profile rather than from a business page. So our relationship with our viewers is through our business page, but when we do a video, the video is uploaded to Jess's profile using her profile account rather than a business account to her YouTube channel. I download it and then upload it to our business channel, and then we swap out URLs on the event page. So then after the fact, people will be going to the Jess plus Scott plus you business page channel, not to Red Directions Jess page. I hope that was clear.
That was a long answer, but very, yeah, I think very clear. And if people have questions, ask them and we'll come back to it, because it's a very good question. And when we're thinking about how do we use this and where are we going to go, there are probably a couple of different opinions and approaches. This just happens to be ours for the show. Yeah. All right, so Scott, let's jump into the next video.
Okay, so what I've seen is that the underlying theme of this program is that there are a whole bunch of things that you can do with Hangouts on Air that we haven't had a chance to do yet. It is such a young medium, and there's so few of us actually who are doing it, and yet there is an energy out there and there's a creativity out there that that is going to break through. And part of our mission in life is to show that vision and to, well, quite frankly, try and lead the way to allow people to have a greater grasp of the potentials that this great technology has. And it's not that, obviously, we're not the only ones doing it, and here are some examples of some other people whom I think are absolute leaders in the use of Hangouts on Air for peer-to-peer communication, for whatever it is. And, well, this one just happened a couple of weeks ago. So Nelson Mandela was memorialized, had a memorial and buried, and one of the nonprofit organizations decided that they wanted to use a Hangout to honor Nelson Mandela. So let's see what this is like.
And hello everyone watching us around the world. I'm Anderson Cooper. Thanks for joining us to honor Nelson Mandela in this digital global tribute. Obviously, the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela has impacted millions of people around the world, and today we want to hear from those who worked closely with him and admired him over the course of his lifetime. But we'll start with you, Reverend Tutu.
This was a man who cared. He cared about us. It's not something that you can put on.
Mahatma Gandhi is one human being who carried the freedom struggle through non-violent sort of principle. Then eventually, like Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King.
The former president of Ireland, Mary Robinson, who's joining us from New York, and also Sir Richard Branson, who is joining us. Welcome to you both.
And I still remember that strong voice telling us to speak out against injustice, to try to heal forgotten conflicts, to reach out to those who were most marginalized, and especially young people. And he repeated that, especially young people.
Idea that he had behind the elders was that his life wouldn't be wasted, and that for decades, maybe centuries to come, a group of wonderful men and women with high moral authority could take the baton forward, could speak out on global issues where things, sometimes difficult things, needed to be said, and could intervene in conflicts.
It's an honor to be with all of you at this time, and again, I wish we had more time, but I'm told we have to wrap it up. But thank you so much for joining us on this Google Hangout.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Richard.
Bye, Art.
Bye, Art.
Bye-bye, sweetie.
Bye, Mary. Bye, Your Holiness.
Okay.
Bye-bye, Your Holiness.
Bye, Your Holiness.
Bye. Okay. So how cool is that?
That's incredibly cool to use a Hangout on air.
Yeah,
To connect.
you can't get bigger than that, and it's something that someone just like you and me were able to bring together. And sure, they had contacts, but they were so willing to use this technology. They didn't use NBC technology. They didn't pay for it. This is just so incredible, I think, and such an innovative way, groundbreaking as far as I'm concerned. I was just impressed by some of the ways that people are beginning to use this Google production and broadcast capability. Right?
I agree. So give us another one.
Okay. I love this one. This is a Dallas newspaper, and what they've done, this is the classic example. We're going from one extreme to the other, right? Small businesses, we're saying all the time, engage with your community. It's building relationships. It's doing all of these things. Well, how can you do that? I can't think of a better example than this one. So just feast your eyes on this, Jess.
Editor with the Dallas Morning News. My name is Samantha Shattuck, and I'm here with Kevin Willey, editorial page editor. Thank you for watching today. Kevin, I have a question for you from a reader. Ordinarily, editorial departments, they take a couple of days to respond to big news. But the Dallas Morning News today had a very prompt response to the news coming out of Washington last night.
Sure, it used to be, you're right, that editorial pages had days, sometimes even a week, to think about issues before they reflected and commented on them, hopefully in a constructive or forward-looking way. But with the acceleration of news cycles now, you really can't afford that luxury, particularly with the proliferation of news online and commentary online. It is a cartoon by the cartoonist for the South Florida Sun-Sentinel, and it portrays Ted Cruz making a deal with the devil, and the devil is sitting on his shoulder. Oh. And the devil is saying something close to, remember, Ted, I kept my end of the bargain. And in the end, we decided to go ahead and run this cartoon.
Do you have anything else you'd like to discuss right now?
My time has been pretty much consumed by not just redoing the page for this morning to accommodate the Gridlock editorial, but then we took the editorial that was on that page and we've now put it on tomorrow's page. Between that and thinking about cartoons and a few other miscellaneous things, that's pretty much been my universe for the last 24 hours, so perhaps I'll stop while maybe we're a little bit ahead.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you, audience, for tuning in. Goodbye.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit more about the type that these two videos are. That one was more of an interview. And what would you say about the Nelson Mandela Memorial? Was that would you consider that a little bit of a documentation and a remembrance, or would you because it was definitely not a monologue. We're not in a monologue. None of what we've been looking at have been monologues. But what would you clarify as the use of the approach in these two videos?
I think the key here, Jess, and to remove some confusion that might even be in the minds of some of the viewers, is that the material that we're watching right now, I drew from about 8 or 10 hours worth of video that I had downloaded to make these little snippets. So this is an example of the use of the Scott treatment, where you take a longer form. I think that the Dallas Daily News might have been a 20-minute conversation between two people, and I wanted to just capture the point, make the point of here is a business that is engaging their viewers. They're talking about their news. They're explaining. You could see a little bit of damage control or a little bit of prevention. They're expecting some flack for having a cartoon that had the devil in it, so they were getting the word out, and they're also establishing the relationship. So it was it was a staged interview, I guess you could call it. It was just between two employees, but they're making a good effort to use social media and creating content. For them to try and do what they did using the written word would have taken probably 3 hours to craft something, and it would have to be approved, and then it would go out and someone would have to try and read it, and nobody wants to read something that's that long anyway. But people will tune in if they're interested on this, and this is probably something that ended up on their Facebook page and on their website, and because they're Google Plus savvy, it's in the search stream, and when someone does a search for something or other, they're probably on top. The Nelson Mandela Memorial is a nonprofit organization that I think might have even used this a little bit as a fundraiser, but what do you do if you are in South Africa and you've got something like this and you want to honor your great person?
Right.
Bring this together very easily, and it was an interview, and it's kind of professionally done. But you also saw two things. One is these great leaders sat down and they honored Nelson Mandela, and the other thing is Richard Branson had so many uhs and ahs, and he repeated himself, and it was great for me because I took out all of that stuff that was taking up time, and it was a power trip for me. I don't know. I hadn't expected how pleasing it would be for me to try and take something and make it very crisp. So.
That's great. I know we probably have a few more. I'm looking at our time. And so I wanted to quickly review the whole idea of what you said, where Hangouts on Air are an opportunity to tell a story, and they're an opportunity to connect with people. And that actually might be a great segue into our +2 takeaway, because we're going to spend some time and we're going to talk about that.
Would you like to do that right now?
Let's do it with my fancy dancy envelope, right? That says +2 takeaway, and we will jump right in to that. I think that, well, maybe we will. I'm making Scott do a little bit of rearranging here.
Okay. I think, okay, so I'm going to allow that, and I just love this technology.
I know, this is really cool. So I made this presentation and sent it to
Yes, you did.
Scott, who incorporated it into our overall, all of the media that we choose to use.
Okay. I'm looking, go for it.
What were you going to say?
I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the whole idea is that video and how we use Hangouts on Air set the impression. They give us the opportunity to tell the story that we want to tell. So we actually have to take the time to plan. We have to have our vision, and we have to make sure that that is in a consistent voice. So that's why this little segment is titled Defined by You. And what we're going to do when we start... Oh, I was not in there, Scott. Let's try that. There we go. When we start is we're talking about the plan. And yeah, my picture is of a business plan that I snagged from a website, but really, video is a little bit of a business plan. It has to support your vision. It has to support the message you're getting out in the voice that you are putting it out. And you're the one that can tell your story best. So no matter what consultants, staff, or vendors that you might use to help you craft that message and make it the best, if it doesn't start with you, there will be inconsistency in the voice that you have. So having that particular, making sure that there's a core team or a core person in the center of that to ensure that the vision and the mission is accomplished with every video or media or medium of anything that's created is there. So we talk about the story types, and Scott started to touch on this, and that was, there are 4. The story of passion, the story of purpose, the value proposition, and of personality. And that actually came from the Commitment Engine. One of my favorite books is that when we commit to doing a blog or a podcast or infographics or some sort of other media like our show, we are making a commitment to our audience. And we now have an obligation to that audience to continue to deliver information that is of value. And so everything that you do supports the focus that you are looking to do. How does that topic support what you're trying to do? Does it support the one thing? What skill, what message, what value are you trying to get across, and does the content of the show support that? If not, you've got to park it. And I love this picture of the parking lot because, oh, too far, go back in. I want the picture of the parking lot. That's okay.
This one here?
Yeah. Nope, not that one, the next one.
Got it.
That one. We all have to have a parking lot. Doesn't matter what you call it. You have to have a place to put ideas that fall outside of the scope of the mission and vision. What if it's a really good idea? So let's see. If it's a really good idea, but it doesn't fit what the story is and what the mission is for what you're trying to do today, stick it someplace. I'll even show you mine. This is my parking lot. Every idea that I have that is outside of the scope of my mission and vision for what I'm trying to do in my business and for the JSY show that doesn't fit today with what we're doing, it goes in there because it doesn't mean it's not going to fit tomorrow. It just means that there is a different time and a place for it. And owning that, being able to say, wow, that does not support the audience I am trying to connect to. That does not support my message. And then the next piece is yes, your audience. Thank you, Scott. I was looking at my notes. And you had a question for me?
Oh, I'm just wondering if you're unblue boxing yourself when you're showing props.
Yes, I'm blue boxing the prop.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go for it, Jess. I shouldn't interrupt you in the middle of your presentation.
It's okay. The big part of it, though, with the parking lot, and then as we're moving into the audience, is if it doesn't support the message and the consistent voice, then it really does dilute the overall message that you have. So when you think about the audience, the who, the reason, the people that you are trying to serve, the people that you are interested in supporting in some way, those people really need to be delighted and understand and see the value in what is being created. And it's got to be concrete, it's got to be situational, and it has to be it is necessary in today's world to withstand the test of time to be something that people want to watch more than 6 weeks from now, or read even more than 6 weeks from now, as we were talking about earlier, how our shelf life is slowly going down and down and down. So that means we've got the whole idea of the conversation. And what is the purpose of the content we're creating? Is it to create advocacy that turns into action? That came from V3, a website that I read once in a while. They talk about having 4 types of consumers. There is the volunteer consumer, the shepherd consumer, a fan, and a support consumer. And each one of those has a fundamentally different role in how they take care of you. So one is going to protect you and jump up and say, oh, you might not, we really love them no matter what. And the support person might actually the support customer might even jump in and answer support questions on behalf of you and your staff at your business, being 2 examples. So the point being that for a conversation to happen, the message has to be at the right place at the right time with the right intent so that somebody finds value, somebody is delighted by it, and they want to share it in some way. So planning and thinking about it, planning a lot sometimes, a lot. Make sure that that message is the way that you want it to be, because that trust and that authority results in action, whether that's a result resulting in conversation with you, or conversation about you, or sharing to somebody else that it might be the right time or the right place for, because of our network of networks and how we interact with each other. So ultimately, what we're thinking about is that when we're talking about our audience and our conversation, we want it to be actionable. And the one thing that I didn't mention that I actually think is the most important is to be able to serve others and to know what delights them and what will be interesting to them so that they have conversations with us, is to listen. I don't believe we listen enough. Even those of us that do listen, we can always listen more and listen farther in more far-reaching places to see what is the unserved demand, what are the opportunities to really connect with others in a way that will help them in wherever they are in their lives. So we can't forget the listening piece. And then I'm going to close with another quote from The Go-Giver. Happens to be my favorite book. And it says, every giving can happen only because it's also receiving. And so part of our audience, part of our drive, part of what we are doing in our lives is because we are giving and receiving at the same time. And so being able to acknowledge that reciprocity that occurs really will take us to the next level and help us stay on message and on voice. And that's what I had for the +2 takeaway. What do you think, Scott?
Well, I am impressed, and I think that the technologies that are available to us underpin the message that you had on your +2 takeaway, because it's one thing to want to be able to listen and to give back or to provide, as you've described, and this is one way that it can happen. It allows that connective tissue that is necessary to complete the relational transaction. How's that for
I think that's great. That's a good summary. And I'm going to end with one more thing from the Commitment Engine as my closing comments and to support where we are going in January. We are taking the next 2 weeks off, and we will be back on Tuesday, January 7th. During that 2 weeks, we will continue to work on the series of shows that we have put together. And coming from the Commitment Engine, supporting what we just saw in the +2 takeaway, and in preparation, there are a couple of things that we should take away with what Hangouts on Air can do for us, plus the planning that is required to have that right message. And this comes from page 158. I'm going to make sure I quote it correctly. And that is, we need to know who we work with. We need to know what makes us unique. We need to know what our clients worry about. And we need to know how do we keep our brand true. Because there are so many neat, shiny things out there, we tend to have a diluted message, and if we can weed some of those out and let some of those go by the wayside, we're doing a better job at serving our clients and ourselves and our team members to really stay focused and have that brand equity be built over time. And what are we saying right now, and how does that support our overall mission? And this is how we take care of our customers, and this is how we all win. So that being the setup from my perspective of the things that you will see from the series that we are putting together in January. And last week's show and this week's show are setting the stage and doing a little bit of groundwork. So when we get to January, we are going to jump in, and we've shared some information that we think is integral to the success and fully understanding where we're going in starting with 2014.
So we know where we've been, we know where we are, and now we're going to figure out where we're going to be going, and that's what 2014 is all about. Right, Jess?
Absolutely. All right. Good night, Scott. Good night, everybody out there. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in 2014.
See you next year. Thanks a lot. Let's see if this works.